Welcome to the Voices of Young People podcast, brought to you by Springtide Research Institute. In each episode, we hear directly from young people as they respond to our research and share about the issues impacting their lives. As sociologists and researchers, we see a new story unfolding for young people, one that moves beyond traditional institutional boundaries and requires careful attention to the inner and outer lives of emerging generations. At the intersection of being and becoming, it's the Voices of Young People.
Groups can focus maybe more on one or two issues that they feel best suited to address, and I think that's great. But they can also then connect to other organizations who are working in other areas and kind of build this larger movement to make sure that all issues are being addressed in an impactful way.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Voices of Young People podcast. This is the second season, and all throughout the second season, we're digging deep into our newest book, Meaning Making, the 8 Values That Drive America's Newest Generations. And each episode here is a chance for us to get to hear live from a young person, 13 to 25, about one of these values in particular and how it's integrated into their lives and why it's so important to them. It's an opportunity for us to get to go behind the data and to really bring some of these stories to life in a full and rounded out picture. And I couldn't be happier today. We've got Aili with us, and she's gonna help us to understand the value of being impactful. So Aili, thank you so much for being on the show. And maybe you can get started by just telling folks a little bit about who you are.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm Aili. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm 21 and live in Colorado. I recently graduated from university with a BA in political science and sociology. And I'm starting my career in the realm of politics.
Fantastic. And first of all, I'll just say, I've been feeling this for all of my students, and I extend I don't even know what the right emotion is. Condolences seems like the wrong word about graduating. Like, you shouldn't be expressing condolences for graduating, but you didn't get to have a ceremony. Like, there's no pomp and circumstance and like walking across the stage. And I don't know if that was important to you, but I know it's important to a lot of people. And that seems like something that would be missed.
Yeah, it's definitely disappointing. And I mean, as like a sociology major, we learn about like rituals and why they're so important. So I was kind of looking forward to that. But, I still got my degree and still had an amazing time. So it's okay. And I still got to celebrate with my family. So that was nice.
Well, it is super important. And I hope that there's something, some sort of official like rite of passage. I don't know, maybe all the 2020 graduates will get together at some point and like, when this is all over, like everybody has to go to St. Louis or something and like give each other a group hug. It seems like the only appropriate thing to do. So we're in this chapter, we're uncovering this value, which I think is actually sort of hard to articulate. It was for us anyway, about this notion that like young people want to be impactful. And that is to say that there's a certain, a higher level that of like commitment that they expect to both have with the kinds of organizations that they're a part of, whether volunteers or as workers, or even as consumers sometimes. But they also expect that same level of commitment back from those organizations, that they want a chance for their lives to mean something deeper than just showing up and sort of punching the clock and going through the motions. And I know this has been a big part of your life. Can you just get us started by talking a little bit about why it's so important for you to live a life that's impactful and what that means to you?
Yeah, to me, the value impactful means like doing something that helps make a difference in society and create positive change in some way. I think this can be done, at like the micro level where you're impacting individuals' lives every day through like direct action, or at the macro level, changing policies, pursuing litigation, stuff like that. And so there's a lot of different ways to be impactful. And to me, that's really important that I like dedicate my time and energy into things that are making an impact. Because I want to feel more connected to other people in society and not just like live in my own bubble and be concerned about others and not just myself and my own growth. And I think that kind of helps build stronger communities too, which is really important.
I think you're absolutely right. And that is, we kept hearing that over and over again, that this notion of being in community is important, and living a life that's impactful through all of your decisions is one of the ways certainly that can happen. But I think it's important here to really, to kind of unpack this just a little bit. And one of the things we uncovered as we started it through the interview process primarily, and through looking at how some other social scientists have defined this kind of phenomenon, this value in particular, is that it's really twofold. It's one is about actively engaging key social issues, and the other is about minimizing harmful consequences through the choices that you make or don't make, as opposed to sort of like thoughtfully making the right kinds of choices. So there's both this like do no harm, but also this like this real drive to also do something incredibly positive. Of those two, like this do no harm or this be positive, like which of those drives you more?
For me, it's kind of hard to have one without the other, I think. You kind of have to be doing both. I definitely think minimizing harm is kind of one of the first steps. You have to look inward and make sure you're doing the work, and then you can kind of engage outward too and start making more of that positive impact.
And are there organizations or people that you've been fortunate enough to be around that have sort of modeled that for you, or that has sort of helped you to lead an impactful life? Which just knowing what I know about you already, it's clear that you're doing that.
Yeah, there are definitely multiple organizations that I've been a part of who are doing really impactful work. In high school, I started kind of this journey of social justice, and kind of pushed me towards wanting to do impactful work was an organization called Building Bridges, which is hosted in Denver. And they work with young people to help equip them with leadership and communication skills to address hate and discrimination in our communities. So with them, I did a program that brought together Israeli and Palestinian and American young women together, and we talked about a bunch of different social issues, dove into the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, and then kind of decided what we wanted to do back home. And so throughout the school year, we found projects to bring the skills back to our community and have an impact back home. So I did a project called a mask making workshop, where people are partnered up, and it's really a workshop on vulnerability and empathy building. So that was a direct way for me to kind of minimize harm within my community, and also engaging directly with the social issues and trying to build a stronger community in my high school. I did that workshop within my high school following a school shooting that happened. And so it was really important for us to kind of come together, build community, and build that trust again. So that was like actively engaging. And then going into college, I knew I wanted to continue to find organizations that were doing impactful work. So I applied for the Miramontes Arts and Sciences program, which helps underrepresented students, so students of color and first generation students. And through them, their active work, I feel like, is making sure that these underrepresented students feel comfortable at the university campus and have a space for them, because they're often left out, and are both like highly visible on campus and tokenized, but also invisible and not heard, and their needs aren't always met. And so being part of that community was really helpful for my individual growth and for me to feel comfortable on campus. And then also for me to then take on leadership positions within that group and help incoming freshmen feel comfortable and represented, so that they could make it all the way through graduation and get a degree. So
Yeah, that's amazing. So this kind of stuff started for you at a very, I mean, I don't know how you would describe this, but I mean, at 42, I would say that at a very young age, that like you're already doing like really committed and important work in the world. That I'm really curious about where this impulse comes from. So at Springtide, we say that we focus on this intersection between the inner and outer lives of 13 to 25-year-olds, or sort of their religious and daily lives. And so what you're describing sounds very much like, in some ways, like a religious impulse almost. This sort of language that you're using is something that people of faith often use, but not exclusively. Like more and more we keep talking to young people who really want to lead these impactful lives, and it's not necessarily tied into their faith, although sometimes it is. So I'm curious about, for you, Aili, like where does that come from for you? What spurs that interest? Because you're obviously very smart. You could go and do anything you want, and you choose to do this kind of work, which is really important, but I'm curious about why.
yeah, I think I just value the relationships I've had. I've had really great mentors who are really passionate about um, leading an impactful life, and I could see just the way they lived kind of brought joy to their work as well. I think like you said, it seems like a young age, but I think it could have started a lot earlier too, in education, to really make sure people are thinking about the impact they have in the world, making sure that there's the saying, like, you're treating other people the way you want to be treated, but also that you're treating them the way that they want to be treated. And it
The
doesn't
golden rule
always,
and the
yeah,
platinum rule. Yeah.
yeah, doesn't revolve around you. And so I think I've always kind of been mindful of other people. And then going through the Building Bridges program really opened me up to like these bigger issues of inequality and structural issues. And I thought that was something that I could be a part of changing. So.
Okay, so somebody, if I'm out there trying to either find a volunteer or hire somebody, or figure out who to promote in my organization, um, or simply to find some people that I can like, well, that's a leader that I can get other like really vulnerable folks, or maybe I'm working with other kids or young people, and I'm like, they would be drawn. I need to find that person. I need to find the right person, and you're the right person, right? So like, I can tell already, Eili's the person that like I would want to have on my team. And I know you just joined a team, like you just started a new job a couple of days ago. How does an employer or somebody who's running a nonprofit or somebody who's a faith-based organization or whatever it is, how do they communicate to you, who cares so much about doing impactful work, that this organization is a place where you can do that and you'll be supported?
Yeah, I think being really transparent and just saying that that's the goal and that's what companies are looking for is really important. And then following through on those words and showing where they've actually implemented new projects or
Hmm.
plans that they've already outlined. So it's not just talk, to show that there's actually something behind what they're looking for. For me, like when I look for a leader, or like someone I want to work for, it's really important to me that they also show that they're willing to make mistakes and grow,
Hmm.
and that they're willing to hear feedback. Because I think we all know that we all make mistakes, but a lot of people aren't willing to admit that. And so it's a lot harder to have dialogues on how to change the culture of a company or how to bring in new hires if you're not willing to admit that there's like something wrong. So I think that's a really key issue. And then being clear on like what the company wants when it comes to being impactful, if they are focusing more on the minimizing harm and maybe educating their staff, or if they want to like actively be out in the community doing things, mixture of both. I think highlighting that would be really important to draw new people in.
So as you think about where to spend your time and your energy and your talents, I think like, when I was your age, companies were at best, organizations would maybe have like a social or corporate responsibility unit. It was like, okay, so we can keep doing business as usual over here, as long as we have this other unit that strikes me as being very similar now to the way a lot of places treat diversity, equity, and inclusion. It's like all of that kind of work happens siloed off, off to the side. Um, but I think what I hear you saying is that has maybe changed, and our data seem to support that. So in our survey, 50%, half of young people told us that organizations have a responsibility to actively do good in the world, that they can't just sort of be neutral. And I'm wondering how you respond to that. Is it possible for organizations to just sort of, whether it's a for-profit or nonprofit company or whatever, can they just sort of be neutral, or do you think that they have to be trying to return value to the world?
I think it definitely depends on the organization and what kind of work they're doing, but to me, it'd be really important that they are actively doing something, because neutrality is not going to cut it at this
Hmm.
point, because it does help perpetuate these systems of inequality. So you're not really truly being neutral. So I always find it a little iffy when companies or individuals try to claim that they are. And I think it's also really discouraging and going to be difficult to hire people of color or young people or other marginalized communities by using that message, because it kind of sends a message of what the corporate culture is going to be like, and it doesn't feel very welcoming, because it kind of gives off this feeling of colorblindness, of we're all equal, when in reality we aren't equal. So if you treat everyone equal, then your results are still going to be unequal. So kind of making sure you're addressing inequality in the workplace, I think, is really important. And like you said, baking it into the whole system and not just one unit or one day of training. Because if you might have people in your staff who are going to attend those trainings who aren't really paying attention or don't really care and are just going to use it as like, okay, I did that, check that off my list. And it's not really going to sit in unless it's like a daily thing of understanding how to behave and be impactful every day.
Yeah, I think that's such a good point. This notion of baking it in, right? That it as opposed to just this, um, I think they're even on the consumer side, they're even I'm starting to hear more and more conversations of young people who are really aligning themselves with companies that they think really truly get it, as opposed to just sort of making a donation once or twice a year, but that
Mm-hmm.
like from their supply chain from beginning to end, they're thinking about, say, ecological sustainability all the way through, if that's a particular value that company cares about. And I think it's important to understand that, at least from what we keep hearing, is that every organization doesn't have to do everything,
Mm-hmm.
right? But it's really crucial that you do some things. And then of course there are some things that are, I would say, maybe non-negotiable, like you talked about the inequality in the workplace and making sure that at least your own employees, and you're addressing that in your own house, is important. Aili, as we think about getting down to some, as we sort of wrap up here and getting down to some specific leaders, are there people in your life that you've really thought of as models for how to lead an impactful life, or that have helped to show you like, oh, there are several decisions you could make here, but I think you'll be like live a more fulfilled life if you go this direction?
Yeah, I think it's hard to choose just one person. I've been really lucky to have a lot of really great mentors in my life. But the first person who kind of came to mind was the director of a program that I was part of in college. She kind of heads this, it's a scholarship program that also has community aspect to it, and has like a classroom aspect to it. And I think she really modeled kind of what I was talking about earlier, the being open to criticism and wanting to grow as a leader. So I interned in the office, and so she was my supervisor. And she invited us interns and had all of her staff, so it's a group of 8 of us, talk about this book, White Fragility, by Robin DiAngelo. And so she was really interested in making sure that our community was going to be supportive of people of color and Black people in particular. And so she wanted to make sure we were doing the work in-house to really look into racism and making sure that we were creating a community that was welcoming. And so talking about race is a really difficult discussion. And so to start the meeting, our very first meeting, she was really open about like addressing that there was a hierarchy of supervisors, interns, staff, faculty. Everyone came with their own educational background as well. But she really wanted to make sure people felt comfortable coming to her and telling her if she said something problematic, or if they wanted to just have a deeper conversation with her. And so she opened her door for that. And I thought that was really important, because it shows that just because you're like the leader of the group doesn't mean that there isn't room for you to still grow. And I think communicating that very clearly to your staff is important. So I really appreciated that. Additionally, just her like interpersonal skills, always greeting students and having the one-on-one conversations, I think is really impactful to making sure people feel included and can succeed in the higher ed area. And then some other mentors that I've had were just powerful women in politics who worked really hard to get to the positions that they have, and wanted to make sure to put their community first, and were willing to listen and put other people before themselves, but also keeping in mind self-care and being mindful of that as well.
So it's a really good point that you bring up. One of the things that we can do, and I've experienced this myself as a professor in small ways. I don't think ever necessarily with all these intentions, but now that I'm putting the pieces together with what you're saying, it's like some of those really powerful moments have been when I've worked really hard to pull back the curtain for my students in terms of either like how the system that they are living in works, because a lot of them are first generation students, as I was. you create space for people's energy and passions to be directed in really productive ways, that they actually can sort of, focus all of that collectively to make changes in the ways that they care about. Not that you have to necessarily be directing their change, or determining for them what kind of, actions they want, but simply helping them to understand where the sort of fulcrum points are, can be this really powerful like moment of transparency to say, like, right here's where it all comes down. Or like, you can talk to me about these things and I have power in this area, but I don't have power over here, but I can help you. And so being like, in that way, sort of being a small kind of ally for people's passions in this like super mundane bureaucratic sense can be really empowering for people that want to live, make impact at a broader scale. And I really appreciate that. I hadn't thought about that until just now. So I'm sort of processing this out loud a little bit, but I thank you for that thought.
You're welcome.
As we wrap up here about impactful, I mean, there's a whole lot more to unpack about this, but is there anything else as you were thinking about this conversation that we were going to have? Is there anything else that you wanted to say, or that you think that, the adults, primarily like older, adults who are running programs and organizations, should know about how 13 to 25-year-olds think about what it means to desire to live an impactful life?
I think one thing that I thought a lot about was also just being part of communities that have like-minded individuals who also want to make that impact. So not just leadership, but having peers who want to do that same work is really motivating and helps you build connections, network, and then also have a bigger impact because there's more people doing the work. So I think that's really important. And then going back to something you said earlier too about groups can focus maybe more on one or two issues that they feel best suited to address. And I think that's great. But they can also then connect to other organizations who are working in other areas and kind of build this larger movement to make sure that all issues are being addressed in an impactful way.
Embedding yourselves in groups and communities, you're starting to sound like the sociologist that you are.
Yeah, I guess so.
Well, hey, I really appreciate you taking the time today. This has been great. I mean, these conversations are really important for our audience, especially. And it's one thing to see the data, but it's a whole other thing to hear it brought to life by somebody like you. So thank you very much for being on the show today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. This was a great discussion.
Visit springtideresearch.org to hear more voices of young people and purchase our latest book, Meaning Making: 8 Values That Drive America's Newest Generations. Sign up for our newsletter and be the first to learn about our upcoming research, including the 2020 State of Religion and Young People report coming out this fall. Today's show was produced by Marta Abuaji and TJ Birnbaum, with original music by high school student Christian Unthank. Special thanks to our guest today and all the young people whose perspectives and insights make our research possible. Remember to find us on social media at WeAreSpringtide and share your own story with the hashtag #ShowUpForYoungPeople. Thanks for listening.